Hi, I'm Shannon Martin, and I've worked with families caring for aging loved ones for over 25 years. I have a master's degree in social work and a graduate certification in gerontology. And I have worked in nursing homes, hospice, home care, and geriatric care management. I've written thousands of articles on aging well and all aspects of caregiving. Today, I'm going to share some really important information for those of you who might have noticed some forgetfulness or other changes in your older parents or loved ones. Often we don't know what this means, if it's just the nature of getting older or something we should worry about. I'll give a brief introduction to dementia and some of the terms, and then we'll talk about 10 key signs of some type of memory disorder and how to distinguish that from normal changes that come with aging or things that sometimes happen to any of us in our busy lives. So just to start, to give some context to the terminology, I'm going to be using the term dementia a lot here. Dementia is not a specific disease. Dementia is the broad term for a syndrome or a group of symptoms caused by different diseases. The symptoms that I'll talk about are not just aging, but we'll talk about what is normal. We do experience some changes to the way we process things and learn as we age, but those changes shouldn't affect daily living. People can learn, remember, create, and manage complex tasks well into their 90s, 100s. And these symptoms that we'll talk about are indicative of one of these diseases going on, one of many possible diseases. So the most commonly known one is Alzheimer's disease. And the other one that's pretty common is vascular dementia, which is dementia caused by strokes and cardiovascular issues. So there's a number of different causes that could be underlying this. And we're sort of talking about the broad signs that sort of cross the board with all of these. And so when seeing these in an aging loved one, this will be an indication to seek further evaluation to understand what is really going on. And one of the really important reasons for pinpointing these symptoms and finding out what is happening is that there are some reversible causes of dementia or causes of these types of symptoms. So the previous slide showed some diseases which are not reversible, they're not curable, and they are progressive. And those are what we often think of with aging-related dementia. But there are things including vitamin deficiencies and infections, things like tumors, and even medications that can cause someone to be showing some of these symptoms. And these are things that are typically treatable or reversible. So this is a key reason why it's important for finding out what's going on. Additionally, of course, it's important because then we can plan and be prepared and take precautions to make sure that our loved ones are safe. So to delve into the signs and symptoms to look for, the first and primary one is memory loss that disrupts daily life. So this means things like forgetting important dates, events, forgetting names, needing to constantly use memory devices or ask others to help. All of us might occasionally write notes to help us remember things or use a calendar, and occasionally we might forget something, but we tend to remember them later, and we are able to use things like that to manage and not forget. Whereas a person that is experiencing progressive dementia may have trouble even keeping up with their calendar or their reminders, and they may lose the notes and those kind of things. So a thing to look for with your loved ones here is that you will notice that they may miss appointments. You'll notice forgetting pretty important things like names, and you'll notice that it is causing problems in their lives. So usually when we've noticed this, it's already a big sign that there's some kind of issue. The next typical sign or symptom is difficulty completing familiar tasks. So these are the kind of things that mom or dad does every day that now they're suddenly unable to do. So this could be, as the picture shows, getting lost driving a familiar route. So my parent only drives down the street to the store. And I find they've gotten lost on the way. They maybe cannot organize their grocery list anymore, or they can't play their favorite game because they've forgotten the rules. So it's quite normal to have, for any of us at any age, to need to look up how to do something new, to need to find instructions for a new electronic device, and to need help with that kind of thing. But what you'll notice here is that your loved one is having difficulty with something that they haven't previously had difficulty with, and that's quite routine for them. So another big sign, and often one of the things that comes up because problems arise, is that someone with dementia may have difficulty planning and solving problems. So things like not being able to pay bills properly, having financial difficulties, not being able to follow a recipe or steps to complete a task. They may not be able to handle problems or deal with things around the household. So what you might notice is things like the household is there's problems. There's things that they haven't followed up on, things in the house are falling apart, or again, the bills or financial issues. And sometimes this doesn't come up until it's a real problem. And it's also a reason to talk to your aging parents, as they get older, about simplifying things and about sort of being open in conversations. This can be a challenging one because talking about money can be challenging in some families, and not something a lot of us like to talk about. But the more that you can be involved with that, the quicker you can spot any issues that might be coming up. And again, this is where the person has been able to handle these things before, and there's not a sudden, but a progressive change in how they're able to manage. The fourth sign or symptom is confusion about time or place. So losing track of dates and even things like seasons and years, the general passing of time. It's normal to occasionally forget the day or date, especially if you don't have a real routine or structure. But this will be significantly different, where your aging loved one might forget, might be far off in terms of the year. They might be very disoriented in terms of that. They also might be confused about where they are. So they might talk about going home even when they are in their home. So in their mind, maybe they're thinking of their birthplace or some other version of home, and maybe talking about a place where they previously lived, or not really understanding what city they're in. So another one that people don't often recognize is a sign of, can be a sign of dementia, is trouble understanding visual or spatial images. So these are the things that sometimes cause things like car accidents. And that can be because of confusion and reflexes, and it can be regular vision changes, but it also often has to do with this spatial perception. This may mean the person loses balance and misjudges distance. Another interesting piece is that they can't often determine color or contrast. So if there's a contrast on the floor, two different colors of flooring, they may not be able to cross over it because it may feel like a hole to them. And this is actually used sometimes in care facilities to help keep people from leaving through a door that they're not supposed to, by just putting sort of a black paint on the floor there, because their spatial perception makes that confusing. So of course, with aging, we all can have some aging related visual problems. So with this one, it would basically be a matter of ruling it out. So if your parent has had their vision exam and they're not having any actual physical visual problems, then it may be indicative of something like this. Another one that can be somewhat tricky, but yet a way that you can sort of notice this is really happening, is that a person with dementia may have problems with words or problems with language. So they may have trouble following a conversation, and the way you may notice this is just because they withdraw. So maybe your parent's normally pretty talkative or joins in if there's a group conversation, and you start to notice they're not doing that as much. That's possibly one sign that they're having difficulty following. Also, they may kind of get confused in the middle of a conversation, repeat themselves, and often trouble with finding the right word. Of course, we all have that problem from time to time where we can't think of the right word, but they will actually sometimes try to cover that up and try to come up with a word that is very odd. So for example, instead of the word watch, they may say hand clock. So they may be trying to describe it by its components, and often using the wrong word in the sentence. So another pretty common sign is misplacing things, and also losing the ability to retrace steps in order to find things, because we all misplace things from time to time, but we're able to mostly retrace our steps and find them eventually. If your loved one is suffering from dementia, you may notice when you go to visit that they're losing a lot of things, that they've misplaced things. And again, these are things to look for on a visit to find out, are there things missing, and kind of follow along with them if they've lost something, to see how they go through retracing their steps. The person with dementia really won't be able to follow the normal process that you or I would follow to figure out where something is that's been lost. And also they may be putting things in very unusual places. So not just setting down their phone and then not remembering which room they put it in or something like that, but actually sticking the phone inside the refrigerator, as the picture shows, or moving things to very odd places. So some of the other signs can be even more complicated, like compromised judgment. So this is where someone's judgment and decision making is different than what it would normally be. So this can also relate back to financial difficulties. So they may use poor judgment when dealing with money, and so quite often they become the victim of scams. Now, this can happen without having dementia, but it's also usually something where you notice a change in your parent. Or again, if this happens to your loved one, it doesn't necessarily mean the cause is dementia, but it is one warning sign. So it's something to keep track of, along with these other things, as to what you're seeing. And when you're seeing a few of these signs, it often means that there's even more going on, maybe, that you're not noticing. And this can also show up in the fact that sometimes a person with dementia, their appearance may be quite different. They can't keep up in the same way with their grooming and the care of their home. So with this, what you want to look at is, what was your parents' or aging loved one's normal behavior or normal set before? So some people are very fastidious about getting very dressed up every day and having their hair done. And then if that starts to slip, they may still look quite nice, but you may notice it's very different behavior than what your mom would have typically done. Similarly with housekeeping. Some people are not that fastidious about how they keep their house, and other people are very particular. And if that starts to change, that's when it's going to be something to be concerned about. Now, along with having difficulty with conversations comes the fact that a lot of people start to withdraw from their normal activities and socialization. So because of not being able to follow conversations, because of the fear and some of the confusion going on in their mind, this may cause them to really pull away. The changes with dementia can also relate to depression, and there may be a lot of different things going on. But this is where you would typically see your loved one not participating in their hobbies anymore. When you talk to them about the things that they normally do every week, they might just say, "Oh, I'm not going to that anymore. I didn't go this week." And then you hear that over and over again. And they may have trouble just keeping up with that activity, remembering the rules of games, those kind of things. Of course, it's not uncommon for people to be uninterested sometimes in certain social obligations, but this is where you'll notice the pattern and something that's changing in the one that you love. And that's where, having regular conversations, even if you don't see each other regularly in person, if you're talking on the phone regularly and even perhaps doing video calls where you can actually put your eyes on your loved one, or people are checking in, this can be really helpful. And if you're talking regularly, you'll hear these things about their life, and you'll kind of know if they're not doing the same kind of activities, or they'll mention that. So it's a way to kind of spot if major changes are going on. And number 10, the last one, is that in addition to these kind of things that we might think of, it's also possible that, quite possible that a person's mood or personality changes. So they may seem confused, of course, suspicious, depressed, fearful, or anxious. And this means, that they're very different from what they previously were. They may get easily upset even when they're just doing their normal routine things. Or especially if they're out of their comfort zone and trying to do something different. And especially a lot of people notice their loved ones being more agitated, and again, withdrawn too, but agitated is particularly one that's noticeable. And it can be very difficult because they may become suspicious towards you and others that are very close to them and are watching out for their best interests. So this is also one of those things that's very important to keep an eye on early on, because as things may progress, it may be more difficult to do things, to talk to them about the problems they're seeing if they're feeling paranoia. Now, a lot of us have a routine and we get irritable if it's disrupted, but this is more of a significant personality change that you might see in your loved one. So those are the 10 key signs, and I thank you for watching this, and I hope that it's been helpful as you keep an eye on things for your loved one. And then from there, obviously, when you see these signs, the next question is sort of what to do. And first of all of us, as our loved ones get older, should be watching and listening and paying attention, have regular visits and calls. And by listening, that's really a key thing. We may be really busy, but plan to take some time to talk to your loved ones, especially if you're talking on the phone and you're not there in person, so that you can sort of hear changes, you can listen to concerns they have, or little things they may bring up that may be indications of some of these things happening. And if you spot concerns, you may want to kind of note what you're seeing. If it's sort of minor at first, you may want to kind of make some notes and think about it if it's become a big change or a regular pattern. But if you're feeling concerned, my experience is that it usually means there is some kind of issue happening. And so it's important to make sure your loved one gets a checkup, goes to their doctor, and perhaps seeks a specialist. And you can approach this a lot of different ways, but that's going to be really important because it's important to rule out any reversible causes, to find out what's going on. If it turns out that they do have Alzheimer's or some other form of progressive dementia, now is the time to plan and prepare and help keep the person safe. So by knowing this, that's something that you can take action on. And it really makes a big difference because there's a lot more you can do in the early stages. So just because a person has a diagnosis of, let's say, Alzheimer's, does not mean they can't continue to potentially live independently. They can still make legal decisions in a lot of cases. So they can contribute their thoughts on what they want as the disease may progress. And you can have those conversations, which will become difficult or impossible as the disease progresses. So ignoring it is definitely not the best plan. So hopefully that gives you some ideas, and it is, dementia is something that is not inevitable with age. So many people have healthy brains, again, well into their latter years. It is a form of disease if a person has these symptoms, whether it's something that can be reversed or something more progressive. So that's why it's so important to look out for this. And there are many services and resources and things that can help if this is the case. So I hope that helps you.